Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit HOA stories. In this video, two men in fake homeowner association police uniforms pulled a taser on my pregnant wife in our own driveway. They had weapons, backup, and zero idea that I was an actual cop. Big mistake. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. Throwaway account because my wife Sophia knows my main and I don't need her reliving this whole thing again. Also, this happened about 8 months ago now and I'm only writing it out because someone in another thread asked me to post the full story. So anyway, I'm a cop. Been on the force for about 7 years now, working patrol in a smaller city. One thing that job does to you is completely destroy any illusions you had about how safe your neighborhood is. Places that seemed totally fine before you put on the badge suddenly look different when you're the one responding to calls there at 2 AM. After a few years of that, I started thinking seriously about getting out of the city. Sophia and I had been renting a 2-bedroom apartment that cost way too much for what it was. When we did the math, we realized my salary could get us an actual house if we moved about 40 minutes outside the city. Yeah, I would have to commute, but the idea of Sophia being somewhere quieter while I was working nights felt worth it. We looked at maybe a dozen places over a couple months. Sophia is an interior decorator, so she notices things about houses that completely go over my head. I walk in and think, yeah, this looks fine. She walks in and starts talking about sidelines, natural light, and original hardwood floors, and I just nod along. The house we ended up buying, she fell in love with the second we walked through the door. Something about the crown molding and the way the kitchen opened up to the living room. I just saw a house that didn't smell weird and had a garage. However, she saw our future, so that was that. What I cared about was the stuff I could actually research, like crime stats for the area, which were good, response times from the county sheriff, which were decent. Also a good school district, which didn't seem relevant at the time, but turned out to matter pretty soon. Quiet streets, neighbors who seemed to actually know each other, everything checked out. The one thing I noticed during our research was that the neighborhood had an HOA. But here's the thing, it was voluntary. You didn't have to join when you bought a house there. The previous owners had not been members, and after reading through some of the HOA rules and fees, we decided that we were not interested either. If we changed our minds later, we could always join then. Choosing not to join turned out to be one of the smartest decisions we ever made. Also one that painted a target on our backs, but I will get to that later. Because of my shift schedule, Sophia ended up meeting the HOA security team before I did. She mentioned it casually one night while we were eating dinner, something about the neighborhood having its own security patrol. I asked what they looked like, figuring it was probably just some retired guys in reflective vests or windbreakers with the HOA logo on them. Maybe some wannabe tough guys in sunglasses. Then I saw them for myself. I was taking the trash out one evening when their golf cart rolled by. These guys had put together uniforms that were clearly designed to look as close to real police as they could without technically breaking the law. Dark green button-ups with patches on the shoulders that said HOA enforcement in gold lettering. Black tactical pants, duty belts with flashlights, radios, and I noticed right away what looked like tasers in holsters. They even had those little nameplates pinned to their chests. The uniforms were not the worst part though. It was the way they carried themselves. The driver gave me this little nod as they passed, like we were colleagues or something, like he was on patrol and I was just a civilian taking out my garbage. I've worked with enough cops to recognize when someone is cosplaying authority they don't actually have. These guys had the walk, the posture, the whole act down. To someone who didn't know any better, they probably looked pretty official. That pissed me off more than it should have. I told myself, though, it was not my problem. We were not part of the HOA and they had no authority over us, and I was not gonna let some guys playing dress-up ruin the peace and quiet that we had moved out here for. But then the harassment started. Once word got around that we were not joining the HOA, these security guys started making regular stops at our house. At first it was just checking in, asking if we had any questions about membership, and then it became weekly visits, and then multiple times a week. They would knock on the door with clipboards and membership forms, acting like we had requested information or something. They would mention how the HOA was the real protection for the neighborhood and how the county sheriff was stretched too thin to respond quickly. They would make little comments about how nice our house looked and how it would be a shame if something happened and no one was around to help. I bit my tongue through most of it, I really did. I mean, here's something civilians don't always understand once people find out you're a cop. Everything changes. Suddenly you're the guy neighbors are calling at midnight because they heard a noise. You're the one people expect to handle every dispute, every problem, every concern, and I learned early in my career to keep my job to myself when I'm off duty. It just makes life easier. So I didn't flash my badge, I didn't mention my job. I just kept telling them politely that we were not interested and asking them to stop coming by. The problem was, they didn't stop. This was around the time Sophia found out that she was pregnant. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with pregnancy hormones firsthand, but they are no joke. Sophia's always been pretty even-keeled, but those first few months were rough, crying at commercials, craving specific foods at 11 p.m. that I would have to drive 20 minutes to get, mood swings that came out of nowhere. She was exhausted, uncomfortable, and emotional in ways neither of us were prepared for. I was working full shifts and coming home to take care of her, barely sleeping myself. We were both running on fumes. So the last thing either of us needed was these HOA clowns showing up at our door, but they kept coming. Sometimes it was just drop-off flyers about neighborhood events we couldn't attend if we were not members. Sometimes it was to remind us about our vulnerable position outside the HOA's protection. One time they mentioned that they had noticed that I worked odd hours and that Sophia was home alone a lot. That one made my jaw clench so hard I thought I would crack a tooth. I told them again to stop coming by. I said it firmly. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. The day everything went to hell, I was at work. It was a Thursday mid-afternoon and I was writing up a report from a traffic stop when my phone buzzed. Sophia's name on the screen. She never calls during my shift unless it's important, so I stepped away from my desk and answered. I couldn't understand her at first. She was crying so hard that the words were not coming out right. Something about the HOA, something about police being at the house. My chest got tight in a way it hasn't since my first year on the job. I told her I was coming. I got permission from my sergeant to leave and I drove home faster than I should have. The whole way there, my mind was racing through worst-case scenarios. A break-in, an accident, something wrong with the baby. I kept telling myself to breathe, to stay calm, but my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When I turned onto our street, I saw the lights before I even saw the house. 2 county sheriff cruisers parked out front, lights still flashing. A few neighbors standing on their lawns watching. And then there was Sophia sitting on our front porch steps, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders even though it was September and still warm out, sobbing while a female deputy crouched next to her. I parked crooked and half-jogged across the lawn. The deputy stood up when she saw me coming, hand moving towards her belt before she clocked my badge on my hip. "I am her husband," I said. What happened? Well, what happened was this. The 2 main HOA security guys, the ones who had been hassling us for months, had shown up again that afternoon. Same uniform, same golf cart, same clipboard, but this time when Sophia answered the door, they didn't just ask about membership. One of them, the bigger one who seemed to be in charge, told her they needed to discuss safety concerns about our property. Sophia, who was exhausted and hormonal and absolutely done with these guys, told them that we were not interested and to please leave. The guy didn't leave though. Instead, he said something about how if we didn't join the HOA, they could not guarantee that they'd be able to keep the baby safe. Sophia's pretty sure those were his exact words. They couldn't guarantee the baby would be safe. Now, I don't know if he meant that as a threat or if he was just trying to scare her into signing up. That doesn't really matter though. What matters is that my pregnant wife standing in the doorway of our own home heard what sounded like a threat against our unborn child. And she lost it. I don't blame her one bit. She started screaming at them to get off our property. She stepped out onto the porch, still in her slippers, still in the oversized t-shirt she'd been wearing around the house, and told them that they had 5 seconds to leave before she called the real police. And that's when the head security guy pulled out his taser. A real one, a genuine functional taser. He unholstered it and pointed it at my pregnant wife, and I need you to understand how insane that is. Tasers on pregnant women are incredibly dangerous. The electrical current can cause miscarriages, premature labor, fetal cardiac problems, and so on. There are documented cases of fetal death from taser exposure. Any cop, any security professional, anyone with even basic training knows that you don't use or threaten a taser on a pregnant woman unless there's absolutely no other option and lives are in immediate danger. Sophia was in slippers though. She is 5'2" and was maybe 140 pounds at that point in her pregnancy, and these were 2 guys well over 6 foot, probably 200 pounds each, and one of them pointed a taser at her. She froze. She said later that she doesn't even remember what she did next, just that her hands went to her stomach and she couldn't move. The neighbor across the street, an older woman named Mrs. Burnridge, who had been watching from her window, called 911. The county deputies arrived within 10 minutes. When they pulled up, the security guy still had the taser out. From what I understand, the deputies had to draw their own weapons and order him to drop it before he finally complied. His buddy just stood there the whole time, hands up, taser still visible in his belt holster. Both of them were arrested on the spot. By the time I got there, they were already in the back of separate cruisers. I saw the main guy through the window, the one who had pulled the taser, and I had to stop myself from walking over there. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. I wanted to drag him out of that car and beat him until he understood exactly how badly he had messed up. But I didn't. I went to my wife instead. I sat down on the porch steps next to her and put my arm around her shoulders while she cried into my chest. Mrs. Burnridge brought over a glass of water and squeezed Sophia's hand. The deputies asked their questions, took their statements, collected evidence. They told us the charges would likely include aggravated assault, menacing, and possibly more once they finished their investigation. And they also told us they had found other guns in the golf carts. Not tasers, guns. Actual firearms that these HOA cosplay cops had been driving around the neighborhood with. I don't remember what I said. I think I just nodded a lot. My brain was still trying to process all of it. That night I didn't sleep. Sophia finally passed out around midnight after crying herself empty, but I just lay there in the dark next to her, listening to her breathe, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that piece of garbage pointing a taser at her stomach. At our kid who was not even born yet. The next morning while Sophia was still sleeping, I made coffee and walked next door to talk to Mrs. Burnridge. I thanked her for calling 911 and then I asked if she would mind if I told her the full story about what had been happening with the HOA. She invited me in and I talked for about 20 minutes. When I finished, she just shook her head and said, "I knew something like this was going to happen. Those boys have been out of control for years." That was the first time I realized we were not the only ones who had had problems with them. I spent most of that day going door to door, nothing dramatic. I would knock, introduce myself and ask if I could share something that had happened in the neighborhood. Most people said yes and a few said they were busy, and I thanked them and moved on. The reactions were interesting. Some people had no idea the HOA security had tasers at all. Some thought they were actual police because of the uniforms. But a lot of people, more than I expected, had their own stories. These security guys had threatened other residents before. They had issued tickets to non-members for things like leaving trash cans out too long, they had photographed people's yards without permission, and one guy told me they had followed his teenage daughter home from the bus stop to make sure she was safe, which had terrified her. By mid-afternoon, my phone was blowing up with texts from neighbors I hadn't even talked to yet. Apparently word travels fast in the suburbs. Someone had started a group chat about it, and that evening someone suggested an emergency meeting at the community park. Not an HOA meeting, just residents getting together to talk. No bylaws, no formal agenda, just people showing up. When I got there around 6 p.m., there were maybe 40 people already gathered by the picnic pavilion, moms with strollers, older couples, a few teenagers who were clearly there for the drama. Someone had even brought a cooler of bottled water and someone else had cookies, and then the HOA board members showed up. 3 of them looking uncomfortable as hell, and with them walking like he owned the place was one of the head security guys. Not the one who had pointed the taser at my wife though. The conversations around me went quiet, people turned to stare. He walked right up to the edge of the pavilion and raised his voice like he was addressing a town hall meeting or something. "Okay, everyone needs to calm down," he said. "There's been a lot of misinformation going around and I think we need to clear some things up." I stepped forward before I could think about it. "Great idea. Why don't you walk us through your version of what happened with your officers?" He looked at me and I saw his jaw tighten, but he kept going. "Your wife was being aggressive and confrontational. I warned her multiple times. I was just trying to—" "She is pregnant," I cut in. 5 months pregnant. She told you to leave on her own property and your guy pulled a taser on her. They pointed a weapon at a pregnant woman because she raised her voice. She was out of control and they had a right to defend themselves. From what, her slippers? She's 5'2". You've got at least 60 pounds on her. What exactly were you guys defending yourself from? He puffed up his chest. "Look, buddy, I've been doing security for years. I know the law a lot better than you do. So why don't you just—" "Do you?" I kept my voice calm. Calm is scarier than yelling. I've learned that on the job because I'm pretty sure you don't know it at all. I'm a police officer. Actual police. 7 years on the force. You want my badge number? The color drained out of his face so fast I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Oh, damn." I heard Mrs. Burnridge say, I knew it. To whoever was standing next to her, You're lying, he stammered. Yeah, that's definitely something I would lie about in front of 50 witnesses. I gestured at the crowd, half of whom are definitely recording this on their phones right now, by the way. I stepped closer. Close enough that only he could hear me when I lowered my voice. You're going to jail. That's not a threat, it's just a fact. The charge is already filed. But I want you to understand something else. If you ever come near my wife again, if you ever even drive that golf cart down my street again, I will personally make your life become very difficult. Do you understand me? He didn't answer, just stood there with his mouth slightly open, looking like a kid who'd just been caught doing something he knew was wrong. The board members tried to do some damage control after that, talking about how this was an isolated incident and they were reviewing their security protocols. But nobody was really listening, people had already made up their minds. The meeting broke up pretty quickly after that, everyone drifting home in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. The HOA, turned out, had no way to prevent a community-led vote on new board leadership. Once enough residents petitioned for one, it had to happen, and when it did, every single board member got voted out, not just the ones who had shown up that night. All of them. The security guy, the one with the taser, ended up behind bars for a long time. His buddy, the one who just stood there, got probation only. The discovery of the guns in the golf cart led to a whole separate investigation, but I don't know all the details on how that ended up yet. We still haven't joined the HOA, we probably never will, but Sophia's made friends with a bunch of the neighbors now, and a few of them have even hired her to help with their home interiors. She feels safer than she has since we moved in, and that's really all I wanted. The baby's doing great, by the way, healthy delivery, a little girl, she sleeps through the night most of the time, which is more than I can say for myself. And the next one is another fantastic story from r/petty revenge, and it is titled, If you are brand new at work, don't be nasty to your coworkers. So I worked at a pharmacy chain a few years ago. The entire crew were very nice, fun, respectful and all that, but then there was Supervisor Mary. Okay, not the friendliest of people, and then her DIL, Susie, started working there as a cashier. Susie was Mary on steroids, pushy, rude, demanding, no one liked her, and no one liked dealing with her. So I called the corporate employee line and simply asked with as innocent a voice as I could muster, I remember an orientation hearing something about family members not being able to work together, particularly when one was a supervisor, and poof, Susie was gone. I'm not sure why I had to do it since they had the same last name. My guess, the manager, Mary's friend, let it slide. Small victory, but it felt good. Still smile about it today. Edit, about their name, it was a unique name in a small store and they lived at the same address. I've worked in HR, it could have easily been spotted. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I live right outside of an HOA, and when I say right outside, I mean the people on the next block are within the HOA, but my block is not. I'm honestly not even sure why the cutoff is in that exact spot, and during this whole thing, I never got an answer to it. The HOA must have also thought it was arbitrary, because they spent years trying to get the zone expanded to fit the 2 or 3 blocks on either side of them that happened to just not be in the zone. Nobody outside of the HOA wants to be part of it anyway, so a zone increase would just start a huge fight and nobody actually agreeing to sign up with them anymore. Not because all HOAs are evil or horrible, I know most are though, but because the president of this specific one was insane. She was known by mostly everybody in the neighborhood because she felt like holding one position on moderate power was not enough. So in addition to being in charge of the HOA, she was also the head of the PTA for the local school district, and the reason I knew that was because of all the times my daughter has had issues with hers, only for the school not to do a damn thing about it. My daughter is part of a study group club that for some reason meets before school actually starts, meaning that I need to drive her and we need to be out the door at about 6:30 in the morning. And damn, ripe stars, those times remind me of when I was a teacher. I usually got up at around 5:40 or maybe 6, and then I had to be out the house at 6:40 the latest. Especially in the winter, that is some major trauma coming back. Anyway, my brain is barely functional as I don't even have my coffee and shower for work until after I drop her off. We walk outside and the driveway is empty. My car is gone and my daughter and I react the same way to something like this happening, with blind panic. It takes us a good 10 minutes of freaking out before my brain kicks in and tells me to call the police. I called them about my car being stolen and they came to investigate and get the information on my car. Once they run the license plate into the system though, they come back to me with some news. Officer, well, the good news is that we know where your car is, and it has not been stolen. It seems to have been picked up by a towing company late last night. I can give you their number and you need to call them to figure out about getting the car back. Me, but I was just parked in my own driveway. They cannot just take a car for no reason, right? Officer, according to what we have in the system though, they picked up the car as being illegally parked and contacted by the HOA. Me, I am not even in an HOA. Can they really just get away with taking my car? Officer, if you feel like there was a crime committed, I can take a report now. Then we can look more into it. I don't know if he really couldn't do anything or just wanted an excuse not to do the work that early in the day. I don't know anything about the law, to be honest, so I didn't want to argue with him. I called the tow company to get more information and get it confirmed that the HOA did call and have my car towed. But we're not given the exact reasoning of how my car was not in compliance with them. I contacted the head HOA witch herself to find out what possessed her to tow my car away. I had stayed home from work with no way to get there and let my daughter stay home after the stressful morning, so I had some time to get myself showered and awake before confronting her. Me, did you have my car towed away last night? HOA woman, yes I did. If you had bothered to read the latest newsletter I put out, you would see that we were gonna be enforcing stricter rules regarding cars. Me, I wouldn't have gotten a newsletter since I'm outside of the HOA zone, which you know. You had no right to tow my car away. HOA woman, I need to keep the neighborhood safe. Me, okay, just for a second, let's pretend I was even part of the HOA. How is parking my car in my own driveway against anything? I was not sticking out into the street or even blocking a sidewalk. HOA woman, it was against the HOA pre-approved colors. Black, white and silver are the only colors allowed. Me, aside from that rule being stupid, I feel like a broken record repeating myself. I am not part of the HOA. You cannot enforce anything on a home that is not even a member of your HOA. If you just call them up and get my car returned to me, I won't press charges on you. I just want my car back. I felt like this was more than a generous offer on my side, and she would have to be an idiot not to accept it. Well, she is an idiot, I guess, because she refused using the worst claim I've ever heard or even seen online from an HOA. The car is visible from within the HOA, so that means it needs to comply with our rules. I had no response to this because I was just dumbstruck at how crazy she sounded. This woman should not have been in charge of anything. I was not giving her blank threats either. I sued the HOA for grand theft auto for having my car illegally towed. I also filed a separate lawsuit against them in order to get the money back that I had to pay in order to get my car back. Because I couldn't sit around for months waiting for them to be ordered to give it back, but the best I could do was try and get reimbursed for it. I also forgot to mention that my car, that is horribly the wrong color and clearly an eyesore on the entire neighborhood, is just red. Just a solid red that is in no way altered from factory. A nice red car that upon getting back had a big black scratch down the entire side. As if when it was taken away nobody was careful and it got damaged. Damage nobody else wanted to take responsibility for and pay for, so again, I had to put the money up front and try to get it back in the lawsuit. It was open and shut with the HOA lawyer not wanting to take this kind of thing in front of a judge. In the end, I was given back the money. As for grand theft auto, their lawyer managed to get it marked down to a misdemeanor and stop anybody from going to jail. However, it doesn't stop there, and the HOA president got some more karma courtesy of me. I was not shy to tell my story to anybody, and the news and gossip spread all around the high school and the parents. The PTA was not too happy having somebody like her as the face for the school, and she was kicked out and replaced. As for the HOA, her reputation there was also damaged and she was removed from power there as well. Hopefully to try and stay out of trouble or getting actual HOA members to think of them in a negative light. All well-deserved punishments for her considering what she had done and the gal to think it was okay. And the next one is a fantastic petty revenge story that is titled "Neighbor kept borrowing my tools until I returned the favor." So this happened a while back, but a Reddit post jogged my memory. I used to have this neighbor who treated my tool collection like his personal rental service, except the part where you actually return the stuff. Most of the time I didn't really care because I didn't use the tools so often, but I always ended up having to wander over days later to reclaim my own belongings. One time, I actually needed a tool back, only to find out that he had borrowed it and then loaned it to one of his buddies. That tool vanished into the void forever. Granted, I should have handled this better, but a few days later, to make this end, I asked to borrow his lawnmower. I made the excuse I always let you borrow my tools. I used it and put it back exactly where it belonged. I just forgot to return the keys. When he came over the next day demanding them back, granted I was always friendly when asking for my stuff back, Oh, I remembered last night. I left them with Jimmy. He said he would mail them back to you. After the neighbor left, I actually went and put the keys in the mail. Weirdly enough, at this point, thankfully, he never asked to borrow anything from me again. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.